Hi guys, James here, thank you for coming to watch, and today is going to be a really useful one if you're looking to buy a new overdrive pedal. At this price point in the market, there's obviously quite a few amazing choices, and I think Origin Effects is one of the most interesting and unique offerings that you can possibly get. If we're talking about overdrive pedals over that £350 mark, probably $400, and then all the way up to sort of £550 with the big one down there. You know, this is not a little decision to make. It's not like buying 60, 70, 80, 90 quid pedal where you might be willing to experiment a bit more. Now, what I thought I'd do today is basically take you through these three pedals, which are the main drive pedals that you can buy. When it comes to the RevivalDRIVE, it comes in various formats, you know, a compact one, and this is the custom one. Although I'm not going to go into the custom functions. I'll just deal with what's on the main top face. Basically, there's more shaping controls with the custom one, and it all gets a bit too complicated, so we'll leave it at that. But what we have is the RevivalTrem, the new pedal, which is the Magma57, which came out just a week or bit more ago, and then the RevivalDRIVE, and I'll just tell you what the purpose of each is. I'll give you a little demo. In order to sort of try and cover as many bases as possible, I've got a guitar with split coils, so I can give you humbucker and a sort of single coil. It's not going to sound like a Strat, it's not going to sound like a Tele, but it will show you what happens if you're lowering the input. And then I've got two different types of amps. I've got a US style high headroom clean amp. That's the 2-rock Bloomfield Drive. And then I've got the Dr. Z Maz 18 for a bit more punch, British focused style amp. So let's just hear those clean. So no pedals on. So we've got the Bloomfield Drive first. So it's set, you know, to sound pretty full and good. And then we've got the Dr. Z. So that's really just set up to be a bit more than broken up. If I was to split the coil on that one, so you can hear. Back to humbuckers. So you can hear it makes a big enough difference that it's worthwhile showing you. So let's start on the left hand side here at the beginning. We've got the RevivalTrem. This was actually the first Origin Effects pedal that I bought. Now this is based on the idea of a brownface fender amp. So that was the post-Tweed era, pre-blackface. And if you imagine it's an amp that gets halfway between the Tweed, which broke up beautifully, which had, you know, no negative feedback, and had that real crunchy British overdrive, sorry, American overdrive sounding tone. Think sort of like Neil Young. And then obviously the blackface, which are pretty high headroom amps that don't break up too easily, although they have a distinctive, beautiful breakup tone when you do. This was in that middle point. It compressed a lot earlier than a blackface, but it wasn't as crunchy or as wild as a Tweed. I'm not going to show you too much about the Trem side or the Vibe side of the first two pedals, because this is about drive, but I will put them on in a second. Let's start with the we'll start with the 2-rock, and we're just going to put on the Origin Effects. I've got it on the setting that I last had it on, which gives you this. So we'll turn the Trem off. A nice thing to note is putting the Trem on doesn't affect the feel or anything like that, which I think is great. It's so well integrated into this. But let's keep that off for a minute. We'll just basically take you through the extremes of how much it can drive. So I'm going to turn the volume down a bit to save my microphones. Now we'll lower the drive. Onto the Maz. Back to the 2-rock, and we'll turn the drive up. Over to the Maz. Back to the 2-rock, split the coil on the guitar. Over to the Maz. humbuckers. Turn the drive up almost all the way. Over to the 2-rut. So the first thing I'd say about it is it doesn't really matter too much whether you're using a American type or a British type amp. The pedal really has so much of its own character that it's able to still give you the pedal character. This isn't a transparent overdrive which is just going to push your amp. This is really, you're going for this particular sound. So unless you really want this brownface sound, which has beautiful compression, it's pretty rounded. Let's go to the place where I would probably tend to keep it, just to show you how I would use it. So you can hear, as I said, the compression there is really rolling off those high ends, and considering I've got the tone almost all the way up, I mean, if we put it all the way up, I'm going to show you what this EQ setting does at this point. They say EQ1 is for the more blackface type amps and EQ2 for the more Marshall amps. So for the 2-rock it should really be. And it's to do with how it basically deals with the upper mids and the upper end frequencies basically. And over to the Dr. Z, but still in that EQ1, which is not supposed to be for this sort of amp. And EQ2. So actually, it does make a difference. I would say make your own choice on which EQ you're going to use there, depending on very specifically on which amp you're using. So how does it compare to the Magma57? As I said, we're not too interested in the Trem and the Vibe today, more about the Drive. Let's put them on the same setting, which sort of makes sense, but not really, and I'll explain why in a second. But with the Magma, we're going to sound... with the 2-rock. So it definitely has nowhere near the amount of compression. The gain structure feels really, really different. It doesn't just roll off those upper mids and high end frequencies as you push the drive up. If we really go for it on this one. On the Maz. It really reminds me of that Woodstock era, which it's supposed to really. It's based on a Magnatone amp of that era. Again, just to show you how the drive works on the Revival. previous 2 videos that involve the Magma, you'll know that I absolutely love this pedal. It's got so much, it's so hi-fi, the sound, when you hear it in the room. And it's got a lot more clarity than the RevivalTrem. The RevivalTrem has got quite a dirty ZZ Top sort of sound to it, which, you know, I think it suits that particular style. It's probably really good, I would say, with a Telecaster and with a Les Paul. And I feel like the Magma is a real stratty sort of sound. Let's just go over to the bridge pickup, and then I'll just show you also with the tapped coils. So let's just pull down the adjustment for the mids. And on the Maz. This is just, I hope you can hear, it's not just a simple sort of a drive pedal here. There are all sorts of transients and frequencies in there that make this a very specific sound of a specific era. But could you turn it into a much more sort of, let's say, anonymous-y sort of pedal? If you wanted to go out and use the Magma57 for a whole gig, how does it work as a transparent overdrive? Can it? Sorry, every time I play it, I just think I've never had so much fidelity out of a pedal. I mean, every note you feel it, you just feel exactly what you're playing. Okay, let's split the coils with that one. Back to humbuckers. Okay, I am trying to get to the point here, which is basically that both these pedals have a very specific aim in mind. They're not generalized drive pedals, and you know, you're spending a lot of money to get such a niche and specific thing. So really, you want to make sure that you're picking the right one if you wanted to get one of these 2 pedals. And my overall conclusion is that the RevivalTrem will give you that very compressed, beautiful mids, smooth overdrive, a la ZZ Top, think ZZ Top. And the Magma57 will be great for people trying to get a Hendrixy Strat tone, or you know, something a bit more punchy in the upper mids and the high frequencies. But as you just saw there, it can work really nicely as a sort of boost, a boost with a bit of color to it. And just to show you that the RevivalTrem can sort of do the same thing too. Over to the 2-rock. Just remind you what it's like when it's off. And on. So there's always that compression there. Even when the drive is so low, it really has a lovely compression. Well, there we go. So RevivalTrem, much more compression, smoother. Magma57, you know, much more punchy, Jimi Hendrix type of Strat tones, that sort of thing. Right, now onto the beast. I've been sort of avoiding making a long video about this RevivalDRIVE pedal because it's so complicated, but let's just do a very quick rundown. This is not me reading out the manual. It's just a person who's not too technical talking about a crazy pedal. Okay, the RevivalDRIVE is supposed to allow you to shape your tones basically to be like a vintage amp. And to do that, they've concentrated on the difference between the rectifier stage. So you've got valve rectifier and silicon rectifier. Basically, earlier amps were valve rectifier, but already by the late 50s and early 60s, you had silicon rectifiers because they're much more efficient. Basically, when you hit the valve rectifier with a lot very quickly, it sags. And that sag gives you a nice squishy feel, which some people like. And the silicon one gives you a more brittle attack, which other people like. The other things that this pedal does enable you to shape the tone in that vintage character. So you can play around with the negative feedback, which is a complicated thing. Basically, negative feedback allows the output that comes out of the power amp, some of it to go back into the front end of the power amp. Now, it's not a linear equation here. So basically, the more negative feedback you put in, the quicker the amp will overdrive when you get past a certain point, because you fed so much power background into it, it's suddenly going to overdrive a lot. But when you don't have too much negative feedback, it allows you to have a cleaner sound, basically. But the main purpose of it is the feel that you get. It's a lot of clarity, a lot of feel and dynamics. Someone else could explain that a lot better in the comments, no doubt. With this pedal, basically, you can start down at 0 here. There's no negative feedback at all. And then as you get to the middle, you have maximum negative feedback. At that point, it's full and you will, compress and distort very quickly. Once you go past that, then it's not dealing with negative feedback, it's dealing with the presence. So you can increase the presence because there's also a correlation between negative feedback and presence, which is complicated. The manual they've put online is very good though, so you should read that before you buy the pedal. This allows you to dial in your lows. That's pretty simple. There's a blend here between dry and overdrive, so you can basically blend together. So it's got a sort of complex feeling there in terms of how much drive you end up with. Ghosting notes were sort of extra notes that they're not just random, they sort of appear depending on what you've played. I haven't really understood it fully, but again, it's another option that allows you to dial in how much of a vintage character you want. We've got volume and output. Now we've also got bright cap here. Again, they put a wonderful description of how bright cap differs between British and US in the manual. I'll just show you how it sounds different. Same with the preamp. And then you've got all sorts of other things. And this being the custom one, you've even got a whole other panel on the front here, which we're ignoring for today. So what I thought we'd do is set them up exactly the same in a moment. And then I'll show you the difference between the valve and the silicon. And then I'll show you the different bright caps and things like that. And then we'll compare it quickly back to the other ones. Now I'm wary that time has moved on quickly. So let's just do this quickly. We're going to dial in quite a lot of negative feedback. We're going to keep the lows here. Volume will play within a minute. Output will play within a minute. Okay, let's go more to the overdrive side of things. Let's reduce the ghost notes. Put the bright cap in the middle. The preamp in the middle. Okay, so let's just turn it on. We're on the valve side at the moment. It's a really great pedal to play with in the sense of like picking dynamics and the attack to it. Again, like the other ones, the quality and the level of fidelity is so good. So we're going to keep the volume up here. Actually, let's pull this one back a bit. And the output, again, just before the middle there. Okay, so again, this is the valve side. And you switch over there. Into the Maz now. Back to the valve. Okay, back to the 2-rock, and I'll just explain what the difference was there. You can't really hear that much of a difference. It's more about the feel of the playing. As you push the drive more though, and the output, you would feel more of a difference in how it works. So let's do that. Let's play with the overdrive. I like the feel of the valve rectifier side. It just feels a little bit nicer to play for me personally, and it really depends on your style, but it's got a lovely sort of dynamic feel to it. And if we roll back, yeah, that feels like a less connected feeling between how you hit the strings and what you get out the other end when you're in the silicon stage. As to how that affects how you play, I think that's a personal thing, and it's great why on this full-size pedal you've got both sides there to play around with. Let's just show you what the ghost notes do, if I can get them to do anything. So if that was off. And again, all the way up. It's not like a delay. You can't hear sort of effect in that sense. So again, it's not something I know a lot about. Okay, let's play with the bright cap, the British side. And put it on the Maz. Now if we put the US bright cap on the Maz. Back to the 2-rock. That's interesting. So if you keep it in the middle. On the 2-rock, the middle side and the US bright cap side, I've got a similar feeling to them, but the British side makes it feel a lot more compressed. Interesting. So with the Maz, you'd want to use the US side if you want to change the way it sounds. But with the Maz, I prefer it in the middle. The amp is bright enough. Okay, back to the 2-rock for one last thing, which will be about this presence control. So if we've got that all the way up. That sounds really good actually. And if you roll back this negative feedback all the way up. With the Maz. So as you've got the negative feedback slightly on, it's basically compressing less. So I quite like it all the way off. Well, there you go. This is not a how to use these pedals. This is a discussion over what the differences are. If you're the sort of person that likes to plug and play and you don't want too much complexity, your choice will be between the first two pedals for sure. And then you've got to choose whether you want more compression, slightly darker sound, whether you're trying to go for that brownface Fender sound, ZZ top, you know, really nice compression for sort of... Let me turn the drive up. Split coils. You know, it gives you that really lovely compression, or if you want to go for the more and as you can see, if you push the drive back in humbuckers. It's a lot brighter sound overall. Of the three, the Magma57 is my favourite because the RevivalTrem to me has, you know, if you want that exact sound, that's what it does. I think the Magma57 allows your guitar and your amp to shine through a bit more. It's brighter, there's less compression, so really there's a lot of compression on the RevivalTrem from the beginning. Not that it doesn't sound fantastic, it does. And then the RevivalDRIVE, well, it's one of those things where you can be paralysed by too much choice. And in the end, I'd probably find one setting that I liked with all those dials and then just flick around the bright cap and the preamp settings. So perhaps it's a pedal that's a little bit wasted on me. I think if you're in the studio, then it's probably a really good recording tool to really fine tune exactly how you want to sound. And it's a much more serious pedal in that sense, and it's quite a lot more money. So my answer, if you're looking for one of these, would be the Magma57. Unless you really want what comes... The tube bias tremolo, of course, is completely different from the Vibe. So if you have nothing else with tremolo, then you might want to go for this one. And someone asked me the other day, how do the two pedals work together? Do they sort of stack up nicely? So let's find out. So Magma57 off, tremolo on. The origin effect, they're all origin effects. The RevivalTrem. Let's just get a bit more. Okay, and then if I'm going to put on the Magma. So first of all, you can see the whole thing, it keeps its fidelity really well. This is not just falling apart. But if you were to put the Vibe on top of everything else, lastly, let's just put all three on. You know, it's not something I would personally do, but it works really well. It doesn't fall apart. And it sounds great. And just so you hear the Vibe by itself. There you go. I love that Magma, that vibe. It's the only vibe pedal I've got, but it's making me interested in finding out what other vibe pedals I could add if I'm not using that pedal. So there you go. I hope that's been of some help. This was, as I said, not a how to use, but just a general idea of what they'll offer you. And if you want to spend, you know, quite a decent amount of money, but you just want to choose one of them, this might help you to choose one. But whichever one you choose, you're going to get a great quality pedal with a lot of features and great high fidelity sound. Honestly, of all the pedals I use, Origin effects are probably the best in terms of fidelity, except maybe the Chase Bliss Automatone, which is right up there with these as well. So anyway, thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, if you want to see more sort of, you know, play along videos like this or full on reviews. And my next set of videos is going to be a 4-part series of short videos about the Dualist pedal. Basically, I'm going to talk about 4 different aspects of it in sort of under 8-minute long videos each, and that will come out 4 days in a row: Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday this week. So please give those a watch, and if you wouldn't mind giving this video a thumbs up, comment down below which do you prefer. See you next time. Cheers.